shock of being discarded. There's a particular kind of silence that follows being discarded. It's not just the absence of words, it's the weight of being dismissed without a second thought. Maybe you were there for them. Maybe you gave too much. And then, one day, they were gone. No explanation, no closure, just gone. As if you never mattered, as if your loyalty, your care, your presence was disposable. It's a feeling that hits deeper than anger. It leaves you questioning your worth, your place, and whether your voice was ever heard at all. And perhaps the most painful part? They expect your silence. They assume you'll stay quiet, that you'll keep hurting, keep longing, keep waiting in the background. But this is where your journey changes, because silence doesn't have to mean submission. Silence can be transformation. The Stoics knew this deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Not louder, not meaner, not more dramatic, but calmer, wiser, more evolved." You don't need to explain. You don't need to beg for clarity or demand respect from those who have none to give. Instead, you choose stillness, not out of weakness, but strength. Because the most powerful response isn't loud. It's invisible. It's walking away with your dignity intact. It's rebuilding yourself quietly until the person they left behind no longer exists. You see, when you've always been the one who explains yourself, the one who gives second chances, the one who waits for people to realize your worth, this moment becomes your awakening. This is your opportunity to break the pattern, to stop chasing validation from the very hands that dropped you. Your calm absence is not nothing. It is the consequence. When someone treats you like an afterthought and you simply stop showing up for the performance, you take away their power. You refuse to feed the dynamic. You become the version of you they never saw coming. And in that silence, there's a shift. They may not say it, but they feel it. Because true strength doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need an audience. It grows in the background, where healing takes root, where self-worth is rebuilt from the inside out. So if you've ever been discarded, forgotten, left behind, this message is for you. You are not broken. You are being forged. And the silence you choose now may just become the loudest, most undeniable part of your story. Let them wonder. Let them question. Let them feel your absence like a void they cannot fill. You're not disappearing. You're evolving. And in that evolution, you become untouchable. Part 1. The limits of traditional no contact. Let's talk about something you probably heard before. When someone hurts you, disrespects you, ghosts you, manipulates you, what's the advice that comes up over and over again? Just go no contact. Block them. Disappear. Stay silent. Let them fill your absence. And at first, it makes sense. It feels empowering, like you're finally taking back control by cutting off the source of pain. But here's a hard truth. That strategy, it doesn't work like it used to. We live in a world that's emotionally desensitized. People vanish and reappear all the time. Ghosting isn't a punishment anymore. It's the norm. And worse, it's been rehearsed. They've seen it before. They've done it themselves. So when you go silent, it doesn't sting. It doesn't shock. It just becomes background noise, easily tuned out, easily forgotten. The truth is, silence isn't rare anymore. Everyone goes silent. What they're not used to is transformation. Let me ask you something. Have you ever blocked someone hoping they'd come crawling back? Did they? And if they did anything actually change? Probably not. Because emotional impact doesn't come from absence alone. It comes from contrast, from becoming someone they no longer recognize and can no longer reach. You see, Stoicism doesn't teach you to disappear. It teaches you to detach with awareness, to evolve, not escape. When you simply block and walk away, you're still reacting to them. But when you rise in silence, not to hurt them, but to reclaim yourself, your presence shifts. It no longer pleads. It no longer feeds the cycle. That's what shakes people. Traditional no contact might give you space, but space alone doesn't rebuild you. Space without growth is just distance. And what you truly want is not distance. It's freedom. Freedom from being emotionally manipulated. Freedom from needing validation. Freedom from responding in ways that keep you stuck. If your goal is to truly break free, to rise above the emotional game, then disappearing isn't enough. You need to become someone they can no longer predict, no longer access, no longer control. In today's emotional climate, healing isn't just about silence, it's about substance. When your silence is paired with growth, when you stop explaining, stop reacting, and instead start becoming, that's when everything changes. So if you've tried going no contact and it didn't give you peace, maybe it's time to do something deeper. Don't just disappear, outgrow them. Don't just block, transcend. Because in a world where silence is common, your evolution will be unforgettable. Part 2, evolution, not disappearance. So let's shift the perspective. You've probably been told, disappear and they'll miss you. But here's the truth no one says out loud. Disappearing doesn't always mean healing, and it rarely creates real change. Because true detachment is not about vanishing. It's not about playing hide and seek with someone who's already stopped looking. It's not about going away. It's about rising above. That's what real evolution is. You don't disappear, you transform. You're still there, but you're not available. You're present, but untouchable. You're calm, but no longer reactive. That shift is subtle, but powerful. It's confusing to those who once had emotional access to you. They send a message, and you don't respond like you used to. They share a story, hoping you'll react, and you don't. They reach for the old emotional leash, and it's not there anymore. And that's when it hits them. You didn't disappear, you evolved. You see, when someone expects you to fall apart, and instead you show up composed, grounded, and even at peace, it disrupts their illusion of control. They're not seeing pain anymore. They're seeing clarity. They're not seeing heartbreak. They're seeing wholeness. And that is unsettling to the person who thought they had the power to break you. True emotional detachment isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's not revenge. It's maturity. It's knowing that you can still see someone, even be near them, and feel nothing. No anger, no fear, no need for closure, just stillness. Because the strongest boundary you can ever create is becoming emotionally unreachable to the people who once triggered you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in the same room with someone who once held your heart and realized they no longer hold your peace? That's not disappearance. That's evolution. In the Stoic tradition, detachment isn't coldness, it's freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what you're doing when you stop chasing validation and start cultivating calm. You stop running away. You simply stop engaging. And when you stop engaging, the game ends. Not because you won, but because you no longer want to play. That's when everything shifts. Because now, you're not responding to them. You're responding to your own growth. So if you're struggling to let go, don't force yourself to disappear. Start showing up differently. Not to prove anything, not to punish, but to embody the peace you fought so hard to find. That's the most powerful transformation of all. Becoming someone who doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to defend, doesn't need to disappear. You remain, but you rise. And over time, that quiet evolution speaks louder than any goodbye. Part 3, Presence Without Access. Let me paint a scene for you. You're still there, still visible, still alive, still breathing in the same spaces, maybe even still connected through social circles, shared workspaces, or the quiet corners of the internet. But something has changed. You're no longer emotionally available. You're no longer playing the same game. And here's the thing, they feel it. You don't lash out. You don't react to their subtle jabs or obvious provocations. They post stories, send vague messages, maybe even try to get your attention with silence of their own. But your peace remains unshaken. This isn't about ghosting or cutting them off entirely. No blocks, no big exits, no dramatic goodbyes. You simply don't participate in the emotional performance anymore. That's what really disorients them, because you're there, but you're not theirs. You're present, but inaccessible. And that contrast is far more powerful than any disappearing act. You're no longer reacting to their highs and lows. You're no longer playing therapist, savior, or emotional anchor. You're just being quiet, grounded, still. And the silence, it's not cold. It's clear. You're not punishing them. You're protecting you. This is the power of presence without access. It's how Stoics handle betrayal, rejection, or manipulation. Not with revenge, but with removal of power. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And you've stopped wasting your energy explaining yourself to someone who never truly listened. You've stopped handing over your peace in exchange for temporary validation. And that is where things shift. They try to bait you, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of habit, maybe just to see if they still can. But your energy no longer responds the same. There's no spark for them to feed on. Because when you stop engaging, you don't just protect your peace, you reclaim your power." Think about this. Have you ever had someone in your life who was always available, always answering, always explaining, and the moment they stopped reacting, it made you feel uneasy? Not because they were cruel, but because their silence felt different, more whole, more in control. That's what you're becoming. It's not about ego. It's not about being superior. It's about learning that your energy is sacred, and not everyone gets access just because they once had it. You no longer chase, convince, or prove. You simply exist, authentically, peacefully, and without apology. And that right there is what truly unravels someone who expected you to stay caught in the old emotional loop. You don't need to make noise to make an impact. Your stillness is the message. Your boundaries are the closure. Your clarity is the answer. So if you've been wondering whether you should block, disappear, or deliver a final statement, maybe you don't need to do any of that. Maybe you just need to stop feeding the cycle and keep showing up in your own life with calm, with strength, with presence. Because when you're still visible but emotionally untouchable, you're no longer in a power struggle. You're in a place of quiet self-respect. And that is what truly sets you free. Part 4. The game has changed. Something subtle happens when you evolve beyond the grip of someone who once had power over you. They start to notice, but not in the way they expected. They check your page. They scroll through your stories. They look for signs, anything that might confirm you're still affected, still spinning in the old emotional cycle. But what they find is silence. Not the kind of silence that screams for attention, not passive aggression, not vague quotes, not captions dripping with hidden meaning, just lightness. They see joy they didn't expect. They sense clarity they never imagined you'd find without them. They feel the presence of someone who's moved on, not just physically, but energetically. And that's where the game changes. Because the truth is, they were prepared for anger. They rehearsed how they'd respond if you lashed out or begged for answers. They were ready to re-enter the story if you spiraled, because that would have confirmed their importance. But you didn't spiral. You didn't chase. You didn't even explain. You let go. And that's disorienting to someone who thought they'd always be in control of how you felt. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's what you've done, not by becoming bitter, but by becoming better. Not louder, just lighter. And let's be honest, it's tempting sometimes to want them to see your growth, to want them to notice how well you're doing without them. But true freedom doesn't need to be proven, because the more grounded you become, the more their tactics fall flat. They try to decode your silence, but they find no drama. They try to bait a reaction, but there's no hook left to pull. It's like trying to argue with a mountain. You've become rooted, unshakable, present, but no longer available for the games. And what shakes them most isn't your rage or your distance, it's your peace. You see, emotional detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about your inner world than their validation. It means you've stopped outsourcing your worth to someone else's attention. That's what Stoicism teaches us, not to suppress our feelings, but to rise above the ones that no longer serve us. So now they scroll in silence. They replay the past, wondering where they lost access. But you're not here to feed that confusion. You've entered a new chapter, one they weren't invited to. Not because you're punishing them, but because you've outgrown the story where they had the pen. And here's a quiet truth. The more peace you find, the more people who once benefited from your chaos will try to pull you back. But don't go. Stay here, where it's calm, where your joy doesn't need to be justified, where your life belongs to you again. Because the game has changed, and this time you're not playing, you're leading, silently, powerfully. Part 5. The slow collapse of their illusion. At first, they don't believe it. They tell themselves this silence is just another phase, that you'll come back, that you always do. They think you're just trying to make a point, or maybe playing hard to get. They're still operating from an old script, one where you need their approval, one where your emotions revolve around them. But something is different this time. Time passes, and nothing changes. You don't check in. You don't react. You don't reach out, even subtly, and that's when it begins. Not your collapse, but theirs. They expect anger. They expect hurt. They're prepared for a scene, but you don't give them that. You give them nothing, not as punishment, but as peace, because you're no longer trapped in the illusion that they hold something you need. You're no longer orbiting their attention, hoping to be seen or chosen. That's what truly unravels them. It's not your absence. It's your indifference. See, indifference is powerful. It doesn't scream. It doesn't slam doors. It simply no longer seeks. You're not pretending to be strong. You're strong. You're not acting detached. You've actually detached. And this hits them in a way they didn't expect, because now they start to feel the weight of everything they once ignored. Your kindness, your loyalty, your patience, All the things they dismissed now echo in the silence you've left behind. And this is when the illusion, the one where they thought they were in control, starts to crack. They used to feel important because of how much they could affect you. Now they're left guessing. They refresh your feed. They replay conversations in their head. They wonder what shifted, how you went from needing them to being free of them. But the truth is, this transformation didn't happen overnight. It began the moment you realized you don't have to chase closure to find peace. You just have to choose yourself. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's what you've done. You've stopped waiting for someone else to give you what you now give yourself: validation, clarity, direction. This slow collapse of their illusion isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming the energy you used to pour into someone who couldn't hold it. It's about living, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that you were never broken to begin with. So if they're still wondering, still watching, still waiting for a sign that you're spiraling, let them. Because the most powerful thing you can do is continue to heal. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. Over time, your silence won't just speak, it will echo. And as their illusion crumbles, you'll find yourself standing taller. Not because you're trying to win, but because you've already walked away from the game. So let them question, let them wonder. You're not disappearing. You're just no longer available for the version of you they once knew. That version needed them. This one remembers who they are. Part 6. The Weight of Neutrality. There comes a moment when silence is no longer a strategy. It becomes your natural state. Not cold, not hostile, just neutral. You're not pretending to be over it. You're not posting inspirational quotes to hint at hidden pain. You've simply reached a place of emotional clarity, and that place is powerful because neutrality, true neutrality, is heavier than anger. It carries the weight of acceptance, the kind of acceptance that no longer looks back for explanation. It no longer seeks closure. It no longer reacts to noise. You see, they might still test you. They might still poke at the past, sending a vague message, watching your stories, showing up in subtle ways, hoping to get a rise, because they remember the version of you who would always respond, who would always try to fix, explain, prove. But that version no longer exists. Now your silence isn't an act. It's a reflection of peace. You've stopped responding not out of spite, but out of alignment. You've stopped playing a game that kept you stuck in loops of emotional high and low, hope and confusion. And this is what breaks the pattern. They can't provoke what no longer takes the bait. They can't manipulate what no longer engages. They can't win a reaction from someone who has nothing left to prove. This is when the rules change entirely, because when you stop giving them emotional access, they lose their script. They don't know who they're dealing with anymore. They feel that shift, not in your words, but in your energy. You're still here, but no longer for them. You've reclaimed your space, not by disappearing, but by becoming emotionally sovereign, by no longer outsourcing your peace to someone else's behavior. By recognizing that indifference isn't cruelty, it's clarity, and it's clarity that brings healing. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." That's what you've done. You've changed your estimate. They are no longer something you revolve around. They're just a part of your past. And because of that, they feel something deeper than rejection. They feel irrelevance. That's the weight of your neutrality. It's not loud, but it's undeniable. It doesn't seek revenge, but it ends the cycle. It doesn't chase power, but it takes back your own. So if they're still hoping for a reaction, let them hope. Let them wait. You're not playing dead. You're just finally alive in your own peace. And from that place, there's nothing left to explain. Part 7. Reclaiming your power. There was a time when you gave too much of yourself away. Your energy, your clarity, your peace. You explained yourself to people who weren't really listening. You overanalyzed every word, hoping to find some hidden meaning in their silence. You waited for closure that never came, because deep down, you thought you needed their validation to move forward. But not anymore. Now you've left that emotional theater. You've stepped off the stage where the drama kept looping on repeat. And you've chosen something radically different. Peace without performance. You no longer chase understanding from those who never cared to understand you in the first place. You no longer shrink yourself trying to make it make sense. Because it does make sense now. It just doesn't need to involve them. You live. You shine. You move forward, not to prove a point, but because peace is the new path. But here's what they don't expect. Your light didn't disappear. It just stopped being theirs to stand under. You still glow. You still laugh. You still create, connect, and carry on. But now your light no longer warms the people who once took it for granted. It doesn't reach them. And that, more than any speech, argument, or explanation, speaks volumes. You didn't disappear. You just became unreachable to the version of them that no longer has access. They scroll through your presence like they're watching a story they once starred in. But now they don't recognize the plot because the story has grown beyond them. And you've outgrown the chapter. This is what reclaiming your power looks like. Not louder, not meaner, not more dramatic. Just clearer, quieter, and completely yours. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer explaining. You are no longer handing over your peace to someone else's confusion. And that shift, it's the loudest silence they've ever heard. The real question eventually, they might return. Sometimes it's subtle, a like on your post, a casual message, a memory they suddenly remember. Other times it's more direct, an apology, a confession, a plea. But no matter how they show up again, the question is no longer why they're back. The real question is, will you stay gone? Because this time, your silence wasn't a strategy. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't a temporary test. It was transformation. You didn't walk away to punish them. You walked away to meet yourself again, to rebuild your emotional core in peace, to reclaim the energy you once gave away too freely. This version of you, the one that breathes deeper, thinks clearer, and acts from inner stillness. This version isn't interested in old cycles. You're not trying to win anymore, because true power doesn't need to be proven. It just is. And now, you are that power. So if they come back, let them. But remember, you don't owe them your energy, your time, or your softness. You've learned that emotional freedom isn't loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't explain itself. It simply lives, fully, quietly, unapologetically. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." And he was right. Your greatest act of strength isn't in rejection, it's in elevation. You've risen beyond the need to make them understand. And that's where your healing becomes your legacy. So now the question is yours to answer. Will you go back to who you were, or will you keep becoming who you were always meant to be?